The events in this program are based on a true story. Names, dates, and details have been changed. Coming up on Bizarre Murders, when an innocent church scavenger hunt unexpectedly leads to a dead body, all signs point to foul play. To catch the killer, detectives will enter into a world of sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And this hunt is far from fun and games. Seattle, Washington, 2006. A seemingly quiet Halloween night, Detective Tyler Booker is enjoying a quiet patrol. He's reminiscing about his first case just weeks before, an open and shut homicide by a jealous husband. He's curious if every case will be so easy to solve. Perhaps it's a cruel irony that he then spots a man's leg sticking out from behind a dumpster near the local church. Detective Booker discovers what could be a discarded Halloween decoration of a dead body. But becoming suspicious, Booker checks the body for a pulse, only to realize to his horror that it's an authentic corpse.
It probably doesn't surprise anyone that bodies are found on Halloween, and there's hardly a tougher time to investigate because you've got kids from wall to wall. They've all got masks on, good and bad, and really, it's a recipe for disaster.
Detective Booker discovers an alarming clue placed conveniently over the body. Written on a poster board are the words, "Yes, Matthew is dead, but his body not felt. Those brains were not Matt's because his body did melt. For Billy threw Matthew in some hot boiling oil to confuse the police. For the mystery they did toil." He quickly calls for backup.
This is Agent Booker. I got 1144. Requesting backup, over.
When you arrive at a crime scene where there's a body, you have to determine whether this person who is dead because they killed themselves or they accidentally overdosed. Because if that's the case, you can go home and let the coroner take over. But if he was killed by somebody else, that means there's a murderer out there.
Police begin a search of the immediate area, scouring the church grounds for any more clues or accidental evidence the killer may have left behind. What they find are more and more riddles. The next one, found under the mat of the church door, reads, "A quick search inside to find the source of sin, and then near the cemetery to find its victim again." Deciphering the riddle to mean another murder victim could be found in the cemetery or possibly the church's sanctuary, the detectives split up, beginning a wild goose chase for another body.
30 years of movies and TV have inadvertently created a new kind of narcissistic criminal mastermind. The detectives who investigate these kind of crimes tend to lump them into two categories. The first is the eye roll, because these people are never as smart as they think they are. But the second one is the chill down the spine, because if these people think they got away with it the first time, there's going to be a second time.
Police find nothing inside the church, but Detective Booker returns with another riddle from the cemetery. The last clue to end your search: find the altar where Noah's dove would perch. It's an odd clue, and one that leaves everyone of the police force absolutely baffled.
The next thing they've got to do is identify the body, because if the detectives can't make heads or tails of this nice little riddle the killer left, then all they've got is the information Mr. Happy behind the dumpster is going to give them. But they've got to work fast because there's a sick killer out there.
Checking the victim's wallet leads to an identification. The ID belongs to Kurt Flair, a local drug addict and petty theft known to many of the officers at the scene due to prior arrests. But the ID also leaves another clue. The fact that it's there means his killer never had any intention of hiding the identity of his victim. This and the riddles left behind could mean every detective's worst nightmare. It's a random killing. Now they have to hope the toxicology report will come back with new evidence that can help point them in the right direction. In the meantime, Detective Booker takes the riddles in for DNA testing, but the case hits another speed bump when they can't find a matching fingerprint in their database.
The good news is, if this is his first murder, or even his first crime, he's probably not very good at it. And you know how he's learning how to do it? From TV and movies. And cops watch TV and movies too.
Detective Booker's new job just got a whole lot tougher, as he is left to notify Kurt's mother, Karen, of his passing and question her. Karen Flair, sporting a rap sheet that includes prostitution and drug abuse, is no stranger to the Seattle Police Department. And when Booker finds her, she's right in the middle of a bender. The news of Kurt's death barely affects her at all. She says the last time she and Kurt spoke, he had just gotten out of rehab and was swearing he would remain sober. Booker asked her for a list of people who might want to see Kurt dead, but she can't come up with any names.
Consider the world of drug users. They run the gamut from multiple murderers to junkies who wouldn't hurt a fly. And they all have two things in common. Number one, they've seen everything, done everything, been around the block. And number two, none of them will talk to the police.
Coming up short, he turns to the autopsy report to find that Kurt's cause of death was at the hands of a drug called a speedball, an often lethal mix of heroin and cocaine. Across town, police find a solid lead in a drug dealer, Ace Horowitz, who was often seen running in the same circles as Kurt. They quickly bring him in for questioning.
One great thing about drug dealers is if you threaten to charge them with a crime, like accessory to murder, they become very helpful.
According to Ace, Kurt seemingly found religion and sought Ace out to convert him to the faith and save him from his sinful ways. But when Ace wouldn't accept Kurt's help, the two argued and were never to be seen together again. Not having any hard evidence to keep Ace in their custody, he is released. But something about his story strikes Booker as odd. He realized that he never told Ace that Kurt's body was found near a church. But still, Ace told them that Kurt had recently converted to Christianity. Booker quickly realizes his mistake and rallies a group to round him up again. They approach Ace's dilapidated apartment and knocked on the door.
Ace, open up!
Only to find nobody is home. Having probable cause, they quickly burst inside, only to find his apartment empty. A series of riddles hangs above a murder site at a church on Halloween night. When the mother of the deceased claims she hasn't seen her son Kurt in months, police shake down local drug dealer Ace Horowitz. But bad turns to worse when Ace disappears. As officers continue to search for Ace, Detective Booker returns to the scene of the crime one last time to search for more clues. But when he arrives, he finds a group of gawking teenagers waiting outside the crime scene tape, eager to learn what has taken place recently. Showing a little bit of a facial tic, the leader of the group introduces himself as Jeff Torringson, the son of the church's preacher, Pastor Torringson. Thinking that it's possible the kids could know something, Booker explains that the body of Kurt Flair was found on the church grounds 2 nights prior, and that they are still looking for any leads that could help them find his killer. Jeff tells Detective Booker that Kurt was a part of their youth group, and that he had not been answering their calls to attend a Christian rock concert with the band Praise. Upon further questioning, Kurt's standing as a newly devoted Jesus freak becomes all the more apparent as Jeff and his friends rattle on about Kurt's persistence in attending every youth group function the church offered. Jeff even claims that Kurt had expressed interest in attending seminary school, and his father, Pastor Torringson, had promised to pay for it. Booker is stunned to discover that some of Ace Horowitz's story is true, which makes his evading of police all the more suspicious.
Now police don't know what to think because the revelation that Kurt was an active church member corroborates Ace's story, and it also explains why Kurt wouldn't be living with his mother, but police still don't know why he left.
To bypass another rant about church camp activities and trivial kumbaya-esque mantras of faith, Detective Booker asks to speak with Jeff's father before he himself is accidentally converted to Christianity.
Thank you guys again. Really appreciate it.
Detective Booker questions Pastor Torringson on Kurt's history with the church and finds a colorful redemption story. Coming from an unsteady home, Kurt drifted from drug fix to drug fix before a series of stints in rehab finally set him straight. Kurt soon found his way to Paul's congregation, became a born-again Christian, and just recently celebrated 9 months of sobriety from both heroin and alcohol. He was welcomed to the church family by most of the parish and even developed a close bond with Paul himself. When Kurt told the pastor about his tumultuous living situation, the preacher let him stay at the church for as long as he needed.
Religious conversions of drug addicts, we hear it every day, and sometimes we're skeptical about them, but this one seemed real. So if that's true and Kurt was clean, why is he laying dead from a speedball overdose? And why is Ace Horowitz in the wind?
After Paul's voluntary interview, Booker informs him of the clues the alleged killer left behind all over the crime scene. But when Booker shows him the riddles, the pastor suddenly turns pale.
There's nothing wrong.
Pastor Torringson explains that he was the one who wrote the riddles, but never intended for them to appear at the scene of a murder.
Now this is a monkey wrench that changes everything.
Paul says that he made the riddles that morning for a Halloween scavenger hunt for the youth group, but because of the holiday, there was a lower turnout than he expected, and the scavenger hunt was to be postponed until the next weekend. He just forgot to take the clues down.
And just like that, all their theories get tossed out of the window. These aren't a series of murderous riddles. These are biblical allusions. There's no genius killer out there. I mean, is there a killer at all? I mean, this could simply be a suicide.
But Detective Booker still has questions to his dissolving mystery that continue to push his investigation in the direction of homicide. He wonders aloud to his partner, if it was a suicide that Ace Horowitz wasn't involved with, why was he running? And since when does a drug addict relapse into a drug as hard as speedball?
Drug use is tricky at best, and seasoned addicts know that if you're going to relapse, you shouldn't dive in too hard and heavy because you might die. Kurt Flair had been a drug user the bulk of his life, so he should have known better, and police wondered, was this overdose accidental?
Then, 2 more clues fall into Detective Booker's lap. After another scan of the murder scene, police find a small baggie with drug residue in the bushes nearby where Kurt's body was found. On the bag is a fingerprint that detectives hope will finally point to a killer. Pastor Torrington also tells police that the day of the scavenger hunt, a small amount of money went missing from the church. Detectives now have a new possible theory. Did Kurt Flair rob the church in order to purchase drugs? And if so, did he purchase them from Ace Horowitz? Police quickly send the drug baggie over to discover just who the mystery fingerprint belongs to. On Halloween, Detective Tyler Booker discovers the body of an ex-drug addict, Kurt Flair, behind a church dumpster. Fortunately, the clues police believed were left by the killer were actually meant for the church's scavenger hunt. Now, Booker's last lead is a mysterious fingerprint left on a drug bag. Police finally corner Ace at a local hangout and bring him in. But as Ace is waiting to be charged, another twist is thrown into the case. The fingerprints on the baggie don't belong to Ace Horowitz. In fact, the prints don't belong to anyone in the database at all.
Okay, picture this. Every cop in the department is figuring the last pieces of the puzzle are fitting in, and this drug dealer is going down. And now it's been several days since they've had a lead of any kind, and this guy, this drug dealer, he might not even be responsible?
But Detective Booker still has one last Hail Mary play up his sleeve. Police know that Ace was selling drugs the week of Kurt's death, and now they know that money went missing from the church the day Kurt died. They assume that somebody from the church purchased the drugs, and they also assume that they purchased those drugs from Ace because of his previous connection with Kurt. Ace knows that he's not getting out of this without some sort of penalty. He begins asking for immunity to being an accessory for murder.
You're gonna have to give me something good.
The detectives bite, convincing him to give his story a new coat of paint. Ace admits to selling drugs the morning of Kurt's death, but he claims he never sold anything to Kurt and hadn't since Kurt converted to Christianity. When asked by detectives why he ran away from police, Ace explained that the only alibi he had the night of Kurt's death was that he paid Kurt's mother, Karen, for sex and was otherwise occupied.
You want to know the truth?
Yes.
I was banging his mom.
Now police are feeling kind of foolish because not only is this guy not the Riddler that they thought he was, when police looked into Ace's alibi, it checked out because he was sleeping with Kurt's mom.
Detectives quickly track down Karen and confirm his alibi, leading them to their next question. Who did you sell drugs to on the morning of Kurt's death? Ace runs through a mental list of his clientele, but every name he gives Booker appears in the police database and isn't a match for the fingerprint on the drug baggie found at the crime scene. Booker presses harder. Finally, Ace recalls a client that day, someone who seemed as though they were a first-time buyer. Ace claims he never got a name from this mystery client, but describes him as an older, short, nerdy teenager with a slight facial tic. Detective Booker is quick to put a name to a face. Jeff Torrington, the pastor's son. Police quickly race over to the church. Booker arrests Jeff Torrington on the charge of homicide. In processing, detectives are able to score a match of Jeff's fingerprints on the drug baggie found at the scene of the crime.
Now things are starting to fit into place. They know who the fingerprints belong to. They've got somebody connected to both Kurt and Ace, and they've got the crime scene. But you can have all the evidence in the world, but you still need motive, and they don't got it.
Jeff admits to purchasing the drugs from Horowitz, but claims he never intended for Kurt to overdose. He says that in recent meetings, he had considered Kurt to become more withdrawn and quiet. He was worried he was on the verge of a relapse. Having learned from his father how to deal and treat drug addicts, Jeff claims he meant to buy a small dosage, not a sandbag. so that Kurt could get an easy fix without fully relapsing.
The idea is not totally unheard of, but there's something not adding up. And police can't help but think that Jeff's being a little disingenuous.
Police press harder, grilling Jeff for hours. If he was only trying to help, why did he steal money from the church instead of paying for the drugs himself? Why did he leave Kurt behind the dumpster under the clues to be discovered by just anyone? With all their leads spent, Detective Booker finally thinks he makes the right connection for motive. And he hits Jeff hard with it. Detective Booker continues to press for information that it was the pastor's son, Jeff Torrenson, who made the drug purchase. But in Jeff's interrogation, he claims he just wanted to help ease him through a relapse. But Detective Booker isn't buying it. Booker remembers the one thing that could function as a motive. Jeff's father was planning on paying for Kurt's seminary school. Booker rails on Jeff, pushing him until he finally breaks and admits that he murdered Kurt because he felt as though he was being replaced as his father's only son. The morning of Kurt's murder, Jeff stole money from the church, purchased the speedball from Ace, and then blackmailed Kurt by saying that if he didn't take all the drugs, he would tell everyone that it was Kurt who stole the money.
Take it.
At the church, Jeff points his dad's gun at Kurt and forces him to inhale the speedball. When Kurt overdosed, Jeff moved the body behind the dumpster under his father's scavenger hunt clue, left to make an alibi for himself, and planned to return the following morning to discover Kurt dead and report it to police. With his confession, Jeff Torrenson was charged with first-degree murder and charged with 25 years to life in prison.
Jeff fell victim to a number of deadly sins: wrath, pride, but mainly envy. He was jealous of his father's relationship with Kurt. And in the end, he's going to find out that it's difficult serving God while you're also serving life without parole.